And welcome back to the ABCs of ERP and Beyond, the podcast that cuts through the noise and gives you the real story on ERP systems, particularly for manufacturing and distribution businesses. And today we are getting into something that I think is probably one area that can be overlooked when we're talking about ERP and the ERP space, and that is the project management side. So you might be thinking, project management, really? But we've seen it time and time again. Companies can spend months and months selecting the right ERP, go through procurement, get approvals, sign the contract, get excited, and then the project starts to fall apart. Not because the software was wrong, not even because the consultants were bad, but because nobody had a proper grip on how the project was actually being run. Today, Nirav and I are joined with Emily. The three of us are back on this, and we are going to be discussing what good ERP project management actually looks like. Everything from structure and planning all the way through to keeping momentum and getting things finished. So stick around, because this one could be a genuine episode that could help save your project. So without further ado, welcome, Nirav and Emily.
Hello.
Happy to be back. Emily, nice to have you back again and share this. You're definitely the de facto expert on the project management side. Running a number of different projects. Excited to hear your thoughts on project management. We've done this on our side. We do this every day, but we do it from a partner perspective, right? And we do it where we try to provide, just to keep the project moving, try to provide best practices for the project. But there's, obviously a lot more in project management outside of just what we do. On the partner side, there's a whole customer aspect of it, and how customers need to manage their own internal teams, and how two teams come together properly to manage an overall successful project. So there's so many different ways, these projects take on their own life. Hoping that today we could share kind of best practices and at least a framework. Like, if you're embarking on this type of project right now, an ERP project, like, where should you start? What type of teams should you start developing? What are the major phases? So you don't go into this project blind at the end of the day, and you're kind of well prepared to manage the different tasks to make it successful.
Well, thank you guys for having me again. I had a lot of fun last time, and I would think project management is probably my favorite subject to discuss. I think it's relatively simple in a way. It's following a structure, and this is really relevant to any project. It's not just ERP. I think probably what we're going to talk about will be applicable for anybody who has a project that they're leading and maybe thinking, well, where do I even start? And frankly, it is pretty easy as long as you make a plan and stick to it. So that's, I think, what we will be getting into.
All right, let's kick off straight away. I guess we'll start from the top, making the plan, I guess. To me, it's almost like it's the same thing as you said with any project, whether it's even, a home renovation project. So you're building an extension to the house. You wouldn't just get the builder in. You selected the builder, you know what bricks you want. You wouldn't go, oh, start building walls then. You'd actually need some kind of structure around it. So I guess let's start with the whole idea of how we start building out this kind of project plan in terms of the structure behind what we need to put in place.
Yeah. So putting a structure together is so important. And I think, to your analogy, there probably are some people who just go buy some bricks and start seeing what happens. So my recommendation would definitely be not to do that. And it can be exciting to want to get started. And if we go back to normal kind of projects, IT projects, business projects, whatever, you tend to pick them up with some kind of an idea of where you're going, a goal-ish where you need to start, something you need to do, and you could just get started. You need to start gathering requirements, so you can just start Googling. But the suggestion here, the recommendation here, is that you stop, step back, and bring some structure to the project, plan out everything, essentially. And I think there's two parts to it. One part is sort of the actual planning of the project itself, but what we're talking here is giving structure to sort of the background of the project. So what problem are we trying to solve? What is the goal? Who is involved? Who needs to be in those roles? What are the responsibilities of this roles? Who are my stakeholders? What is the project governance? What are the project phases? What are the risks? Do all of that first so that you really understand what it is that you're doing, so that you don't get started, find yourself some way down the line and realize you've forgotten something important, or you didn't involve somebody important.
Yeah, I think that's super right on. Structure, going back to Peter, your analogy is the foundation. You got to lay down the cement or the concrete first to build the house on top of it. And this is all this stuff happens, I feel like, even before you go out to look for an ERP system. You are putting this plan together, and structure being the first thing is, like you mentioned, Emily, is roles and responsibilities. We get this question all the time, believe it or not. Um, that's even after they selected the software is, so who should be part of our project team? Who do you think that we should have, in our sales management meetings? Who do you think we should have in our purchase management meetings, right? Who do you think we should have in our planning or shipping? And I tell the customers, like, yeah, you should have your SMEs in there, obviously, but are they even the right people? Right? Like, you have subject matter experts, fine, they know your business now, but who is that visionary or who is that manager that will actually take the step or step into a role that is gonna help bring the business forward with this investment that you're making with an ERP system? Right? Maybe it's not that person that's doing purchasing every single day that understands how to create purchase orders, how to go ahead and communicate with your vendors. Maybe you have that one person that is looking at this from a future state perspective. What improvements can we put into it? Or what background do they come with technology that they should be the better party to be part of, your steering committee at the end of the day? Right? That is going to be providing the vision of what they learn and the decisions they make in the ERP training that then comes down to the folks that are going to be doing the actual work. Right. So we get this question all the time. And from a partner perspective, sometimes a little difficult to answer that. Like, hey, you need to have this person. We don't know these people's background, right? Every single one and what they're exactly doing day to day. This is where customers need to take almost, like, I feel like, 6 months prior to even going out to the market and looking for ERP software. Like, who's going to be our dream team over here? That we're going to assemble this team that's going to keep the structure in place. So when we get the software, we're going to implement it correctly. Because let's face it, these implementations, these ERP projects, once the projects, the system's installed, you're not changing again for 25, 30 years. So that person that's in that seat, that's in charge of that particular department, should have that same vision, that this is a 25-year vision that we're putting together for this project, not just for putting in orders at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think we can maybe talk a little bit more about maybe the different types of roles, because I
Yeah.
think also a lot of people, especially if you're a smaller business, you might struggle to think, okay, well, all of our teams are quite lean. So do we just bring in everyone? And then, is one person this role and this role and this role? And I'd recommend you try to have as much separation as you can, but maybe we can dig in a little bit to the specific roles that you would have in a project. So I think maybe first of all, you need the right person to be a project manager. And sometimes I certainly see maybe the wrong person being suggested. You want somebody who knows how to manage a project, for one, which is kind of what we're getting at here with this session. It isn't rocket science. So someone who's interested and enthusiastic and wants to do a good job will, is probably good enough as long as they'll do the research. But yeah, you want somebody who's capable of kind of pulling everyone together. And there should be someone internal, I will add. You'll have a project manager from your vendor, most likely, but you can't rely on that as the only one. You need to take responsibility for it internally as well. And you should also consider what part of the business should they be from. And I don't think there's a hard rule there. It really depends. But then I think you'd want them to know their limits, I suppose. So you might think, well, you know what, let's say we're doing an ERP migration, then maybe we want, our finance manager or our controller to be the project manager, because finance is the backbone of the ERP. So it makes sense that that person is managing our project, which is fine and totally valid. But then you would consider that if you have technical expertise, maybe you want someone in IT to be your project manager, or maybe you at least want your finance manager to know their limitations and know that they don't know they don't know code or how that kind of thing works. And therefore they're at least asking the right questions of the people when they don't know something. So that's not me, attacking any particular role, but that's what I mean. Consider who it is and what their skill set is, and if there's something missing, and there will be for most people, who then should also be there supporting them. So you have your project manager, and then you'll be trying to work out, what Nirav was just talking about, which is I have my key users. These are the people who will, be testing the software, giving feedback, being there as we just do our discovery phase of the project, our requirements gathering. They're the people who can tell us this is what we need, this is how it works day to day. But you don't need everyone for that. So, who are the right people, and have you got people from the right departments? I think it can be common to miss out departments, and I would say don't do that. Bring them all in. Not everybody from those departments, but make sure you have that representation. On top of key users, you might have work stream owners, which is somebody who takes particular responsibility for an area of the implementation of the finished project. Nirav, you might have some insights here on different types of work stream owners, maybe. I'm thinking, you could do it by department, you could do it by flow, such as order to cash. What's your experience there?
Yeah, we call them, the workstream owners. We basically call them power users. And these are the folks that, whether it's departmentally led or it's organizationally led, right? The whole thing. And they are the gatekeepers of everything end to end, order to cash, receivables and payable side of it. And they workflow it all out. They understand the whole system. Therein lies really the ROI of a project from my perspective, is because now you have that one person that understands everything and there's less dependence on the vendor. Right. I think that's a separate conversation, but that work stream owner, I think is the X factor. You put the right person in that seat, they could really supercharge that implementation and get things rolling. Whereas a partner can't. Partner's not going to be there 8 hours a day at the client site or working with the customer, but these work stream owners can, these power users can, because they're going to be digging in. They're going to be sitting in every single meeting. They're going to make sure that everyone could do their job correctly, right? They may push back, right? On either side, on the vendor side, on the partner side, or the customer side. So yeah, I think that's super important. I think that piece of it, Emily, doesn't get talked about enough, that it should be a requirement, literally in my mind, that every ERP implementation has one or two power users. I think it nowadays, because everything's so fast paced, nobody has time. Let's face it, nobody has time for these projects at all. But if you get somebody that's dedicated to this project and that's all they do, right, and become the power user, I think we'll see a lot higher success rates than what we're seeing right now in the ERP space. Like there's a Gartner study out there, probably, this is a sidebar, like 75% of ERP projects are failing right now because even though the organization needs ERP, they buy ERP, the end users don't have time to implement successfully.
It makes total sense. Go,
I would
Pete.
also say with that, when you're doing that, is you should really make sure that you are communicating with these people and saying how much time they're expected to commit to the project in the first place. I think once you've defined a role and you say, right, you're this, they could be the greatest person and enthusiastic, but if they don't know how much time that means in commitment of how many hours per week, then for them, it's not going to be seen as a role. It's just going to be seen as a liability to them. And how the hell am I going to fit this into my week? So I think it works both ways. One, yes, identify that right person, but you setting up this team need to ensure that you communicate what's kind of expected from them from a time commitment point of view.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, kind of just, rounding out the structure phase of it, setting up cadences, I think is important on each side, making sure you do a project status call every week, if not maybe twice a week when you start the project, right? Those are super important and those have to be taken seriously. Oftentimes I get into these cadence calls and I'm sitting there like the customer just wants to get off the call. Like they don't even want to discuss any risks that are going on right now until like it gets too late and now you're closer to pilot test, you're closer to go live. Like, okay, guys, we've been talking about that. We don't have your chart of accounts finalized. Like, how are we going to go live? So it's really important to take that super seriously. Put that up in the structure, right? So the governance of the project is super important. What is the guardrails here? How are we going to make sure that something doesn't come out in left field and like totally snowball this project, in the wrong direction? Let's hold off on the merger that we're planning to do, right, until this ERP project's done. Right? If you're planning to do a merger and you're doing an ERP project, well, hey, that may screw this up, right? That's going to be a big risk. So have those safeguards in place. Think about all that type of stuff. So you're just focused. You have to have a singular focus.
All right, let's move on because we've got a ton of stuff to get through. Number 2 is project planning. So actually listing out the tasks, what we're going to have to do, when, what the phasing is of those. And another point that we got right next to it is avoiding scope creep. I want to call that out because that's just as important as setting the tasks, right? What is a task and what definitely isn't the task, and not to get sidetracked with. So who wants to kick off with project planning?
I'd love to kick off.
Go ahead. I'm like,
You
kick it
both
off.
put your hand up.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Please,
yeah.
you need.
I have this saying that I say all the time. I can't wait to say it when it comes to planning. So, it's a sports reference. But Emily, please continue, and then I'll put my unnecessary comment in right after that.
So throughout my entire career, and even when I was at university, the first thing I've ever done in any kind of group project, I think we all have that experience in university or college. We're in a group project, and nobody knows what they're doing, or you find you're the only person doing all the work, or half the group are doing the work, and the other half are down the pub, at the bar, whatever. They're not engaged. They don't know what's going on, and I found that same scenario sort of applies into our working lives as well. So stepping back and planning out the whole project as best you can is just so valuable for understanding how it's going to go, how long it's going to take, what do we need to consider. And I will say I get pushback on this a lot when we think about, especially a big project, if we're talking about an ERP migration or implementation, or lots of other ERP type projects too. Maybe you're implementing a warehouse management system, or you're bringing in an e-commerce site, whatever. Those are big projects. They take, months and months, sometimes more than a year, depending on what it is. And you could be sitting at the beginning of it before you've even done your requirements gathering, your discovery phase, thinking, well, I don't know what's going to come. So I can't do that. But I would argue, no, you can do that. You know that you have your discovery, your requirements gathering. You know that there's a period of time for that. You can think about, well, what do we need to identify? You've got your gap analysis. What departments do we have? What processes do we need to cover? Whatever. You know which things you need to tick off within that requirements gathering phase. After that, there's some kind of solution design. What are we actually going to do? Maybe that's the point at which we're choosing the software. What do we need to do there? Do we need to start engaging vendors, get demos, that kind of thing? We know that takes time, and then we know we need to make some kind of decision at the end of that. Maybe we also need financial approval, and that can take weeks or months. It depends on the type of business that you're in. Following that, you're going to have a kickoff and the development and testing phase, which is probably the longest. But again, you have a concept, which modules, which areas need to be developed. You've already done your gap analysis. So a customization or a process needs to be developed for X, Y, and Z. And those things need to be tested. And they're not all going to be right. So there's testing, there's redeveloping, there's testing again. You can assign time to all of that. And then when you're done in terms of that development and initial testing, then you've got things like data migration, which, you probably should have already been working on at that point, but then you've got maybe the real thing. You've got your user acceptance testing, which, takes a bunch of time. And you can plan that out. Are you doing control room pilots? You can put all of that in this plan. And then you have your cutover, your go live plan, your go live weekend, go live week, hypercare period. I'm talking about a mythical project here, but I can already say all of that. No, I don't know exactly how it will all go, but I can make some assumptions, and it's really valuable to go through that.
Yeah, I think all those are right on points. I think those all apply for regardless of the type of software or technology that you're implementing, right? So if you're doing ERP right now, you're doing CRM right now, you're doing what have you, whatever systems you're implementing right now. I think those are all valid points. My unnecessary comment that I was actually going to say is Mike Tyson has a famous line: "Everyone has a plan until you get punched in the face." The idea behind that is how firm is your plan? How many different angles of different things that can make the plan go array have you thought about? In order for this plan to actually work at the high structure was probably one of the biggest elements of this, right? You need to have the right structure. I think it'd be naive for anybody that's taking out a project to think it's, that you're not going to build in, right, different maybe rework phases, different maybe revaluation areas or multiple checkpoints. You shouldn't go more than like 3 weeks without actually seeing something in the system. So you need to have the plan has to be so solid that it's taking account of anything that could come inside the plan and kind of like start diluting its effectiveness at the end of the day. So I feel like, sometimes plans are created just for the fact that we're checking off a box. Now we have a plan. Um, Instead of keeping the plan as like, we don't do a conversation unless it's actually a line item on the plan, right? Now, maybe that's
Mhm.
a little bit too much, but if it's a major milestone decision, right? If it's something that we need to track, right? That should be on the plan. It has to be fully organized. The part that I see where this fails is that the plan doesn't be taken seriously. It's unfortunate a lot of times when that happens. So anyone out there that's listening to this episode, that should be like, the only way you move forward is with the plan, and every step of the way you go back to the plan.
I think that's a really good point and probably something I would take for granted. But yes, absolutely. If I was doing any kind of project meeting that, you're doing your weekly or bi-weekly project core team meeting, we're not just there having a chat. I'm not creating a new PowerPoint for that. I'm not coming with an agenda of bullet points. I'm opening up our project plan and we're talking through those points. And that's the only way I would ever recommend anyone do it, because then it keeps everything also in one place, which is useful. But then it keeps it productive. It means you're focusing on exactly what you need to be focusing on. You don't need anyone raising their hand and saying, "Oh, but what about this thing?" Because there it is. It's down there, and it's not for 4 weeks' time. So we don't need to spend our time talking about that in this meeting. And I really think that kind of helps a little bit of the team morale as well, because then the whole project doesn't feel like, this mountain on your shoulders. It's these 5 items that are live and maybe these 3 that are coming up in the next week before we meet again. I think it's really, really useful from that perspective.
I think also because you're going to have people in the room that this may well be their first ever project. This may well be the first time they've even been in the room with all of the people from the business as well. So I think doing that and having that as the guiding light also gives them some consistency and familiarity. There might be people that are subject matter experts that have been nominated and pointed out as, yes, you are a power user. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they are immediately comfortable being in a room with 10, 12 other people looking at this project charter and project planner with all of these to-do lists. I think if they know over time as you go through it, that they know the cadence of the meetings, they know what to expect. Of course, you're never going to get that if you go in every single time and this week we've got a PowerPoint presentation to talk about this stuff. Next time we've got some kind of Excel file to look at. Next time we're pulling up emails of what's happened since the last time we met. I think if you have that consistency of, let's just go by the project plan. Here's the tasks. Here's what's coming up. Here's what's done. That starts to get into the habit of, okay, I know what I need to bring to this meeting. I know what's coming up. I'm starting to feel more comfortable. I'm starting to feel like I am integral to the project and the team itself, rather than I don't even know what to expect. I don't know before I walk into that room. I don't know what I'm going to see.
If you do this well, it doesn't matter what project you take on in the company. I
Mhm.
think this just sets any business up for success to take on complicated projects.
Just wanted to spotlight something Nirav touched on, which is the idea that the plan can change and things go wrong, because that's really important to keep in mind too. So you have your plan, and it's fine if not everything goes exactly as you expected. That's sort of the idea of, agile project planning, being available to change as and when things come up. Plan for that, because it will happen. So I would always plan in some kind of buffer, plan in the worst case scenario. For instance, if you were doing a customization and you're not really sure how it's going to go, worst case scenario, maybe it takes 8 weeks to complete and it's a $15,000 customization. But best case scenario, if we find out we're able to do it in this more simple way, it could actually be done in 2 weeks and, not really cost much at all. I'll just plan for the worst or put a buffer in for the worst so that I can also then convey that to the team or to any of the stakeholders. We're able to show, here is our plan. This is the buffer for things going wrong. We can eat into that. That's fine. Here's where we predict it may happen. And that's fine. That's what's going to happen. There's no way your project will follow exactly the plan you created in the very beginning. It's expected. So just plan for it.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to add on to that point. Then on top of that is plan for it, but make sure that that time isn't used up because Tim isn't available for the workshop, or, oh, this person didn't find time during the week to do it. So it's fine. We've got some fat. We can just use it for that. I think there's some parts of the project that are simply non-negotiables that you just have to turn up. You have to make time for it. And that fat isn't there just because you didn't feel like doing whatever tasks you had to do during the 2 meetings, because that time can easily be eaten up, and that time when you actually need it and you stumble across something that's a non-negotiable for your business, now you've got to find even more time to work on that customization, and that's what you can't afford. Like, don't get comfy because you built in the fat. It's there and it's serving a purpose. It's not there for, I just didn't feel like it. It's fine, I got some extra time. Talking about that then, a debate point for you though, scope creep then. If we were talking about that stuff where people do it, get excited, and they're like, great, I love the task. Have we thought about this? What about this? Can we add one more thing? For you two, because one's on the partner side, one's on the client side here, debate point for you would be, who is responsible for that? Is it the business and the client asking, or is it really on the consultant to be pushing back? Who owns scope creep? Or is it both?
I've never heard of them.
Never happens. Never happens in
Yeah,
any
never
project.
happens. No, great point. These projects are living, breathing entities at the end of the day, right? So let's face it, the client has been running their business for much longer than we've engaged with them as a partner, right? They know their business a lot better than we do at the end of the day. So we try to uncover everything as much as we can on the sales cycle, for instance. And that's really a matter of how open the customer is, how much already homework they've done in terms of their business process flows, documenting them, understanding their gaps, coming prepared to an ERP evaluation meeting. We rely on that heavily, right? I mean, we could ask only so many questions as we're trying to understand their business, but we'll also kind of make some assumptions along the way. Like, okay, we know that if you're having some inventory control issues, that's most likely due to maybe you're not, vouchering your receipts potentially correctly. You're not doing a three-way match or something along like that, right? Or the landed cost is not a factor that maybe you need landed cost to get accurate inventory control or costing. So we could make some general assumptions at the end of the day, but things like that happen. And what I always refer back to, and what I tell our team is, when scope creep happens, number one, you have to have a conversation. Don't ignore it. Okay. Don't ignore it, because that's the worst thing you could do. Number two is, how important is it? Is it a nice to have, or do we need it? Right? At the end of the day, whatever the change is in functionality. And is there an out of the box functionality for it, or do we have to do a customization? We have to gather all of this information first to really even realize, is it a scope creep for phase one, or is it something that we're going to do in phase two? Sometimes to ring the alarm too early, right? People may feel deflated and say, oh my God, we didn't think about this, or holy cow, we need to pause everything. Well, that's sometimes not the case. Let's go to our structure of the project. Let's go to the steering committee. Let's talk about this from a common sense perspective, and let's make the best decision for the outcome of the implementation, whether that's phase one or phase two. So you have to be careful who you mentioned that is this a scope creep or not, right? Because you actually need to have this decision with the actual steering committee on the impact of the scope creep before we call it a scope creep at the end of the day, right? And then if it is something that we have to do phase one, let's plug it in there. Let's all come into agreement exactly what we're doing here to keep the project moving forward, and something we're going to talk about later on, so we don't stop the momentum. Because that could easily be momentum killers. And next thing you know, the project's on hold. Everyone's discussing internally for things that maybe are 5-minute conversations, right? That's why it's important to go back to the structure so you can make the decisions quickly and keep the project moving.
So this won't be much of a debate because I'm in complete agreement with everything Nirav just said. But I'll add a couple of comments from sort of the business side, the client side. Ultimately, I believe it's the business's responsibility to ensure scope creep doesn't happen, particularly me as a project manager or a program manager. It's my job to make sure we're on top of that. And I guess there's two ways to avoid it. One is by involving all the right people at the beginning, and making sure they understand what we're doing when we're doing our requirements gathering so that we don't realize something later that we forgot. And then also it's keeping on top of those. Oh, can we just have this? How about it does this? Can it do this? Can I just press this big red button and all of the work is automated and it makes me a cup of coffee at the end? Because they'll ask for that. And so to Nirav's point about what he would do from the vendor side, that's what I'm looking for in a vendor. I want to get value, or I see it as a very valuable trait in a vendor if they can support me in that journey and kind of challenge back on my key users and my workstream owners as well when they're asking for that kind of thing. Do we really need this? If so, okay, what is the right chain of command to go up to? Because also you could just have one key user say, yeah, I really want it to be able to do this. And then your vendor goes away and does it and charges you for it. So you really want someone who's on top of that kind of thing. And then all of this, I would say, harks back to what we said at the beginning, which is putting all of that structure in place gives you this ability to say, okay, let's take that to the steering committee. Let's talk about that in the weekly project meeting. It puts everybody on the same page with how to deal with that. And the only time I'd really accept scope creep, I guess, is when we forgot something important. But you probably forgot something important because you didn't involve the right people in the right meeting, or you scheduled that meeting at a time when they couldn't really engage properly, whatever. So I think you can definitely do work to avoid that kind of thing by making sure at the beginning you involve the right people, plan everything very well. And then it's asking that question of, is this needed?
Scope creep, I've never heard of them. I'd love to meet them one day.
Love to be in your projects if you never have it. Great. Have less grey hairs. Point number 3 then, visibility. So we're talking about project management. So it's easy to go, yeah, project management, it's all down to the project manager. But we know that if the project manager is the only person that really knows the status of the project, then you haven't got any visibility at all. You've probably got a single point of failure if it's just that person that actually knows the status of the project. So and when we're talking about project management, let's break down what we mean by visibility, why it's important, what increases visibility, what we need to do to increase visibility, and what we should avoid to keep our project running and on track.
So visibility, it's from a project perspective, there's a couple things here. One is I always feel anything visual is so much better for people, right? And here I'm talking about tactically what they see day to day, right? Like what are my green tasks versus what are yellow, what are red. I love the stoplight approach at the end of the day. If there's anything, whether it's from a project plan perspective or an open issues list, right? Where are we overall in the project with the stoplight approach, and then assigning people, super important. Now there's a lot of really intuitive project management tools out there. And I think this gets underutilized. Us internally, for example, for our projects, we use Smartsheet that has like conditional formatting where you could put, green rows versus yellow rows versus red rows and that type of stuff. And it automatically, as you assign people to tasks, it shoots them an email, right? Shoots them a notification, which is huge. I think if you're not using that for this type of project, you should. That's going to eliminate a lot of confusion because these project management or collaboration tools are super robust. You could attach documents on there, all these different type of files. You could have like a running chain or thread of comments on single threads, which keep the everybody aware of what's happening. Obviously, so I think that in itself is important from a visibility standpoint. And right, I think just looking at visibility from maybe a little bit more of the abstract sense is, are you talking to the right people for your project, right? Is department head, the end users talking to the key users? Are the key users talking to the steering committee? The power users, are the power users talking to the steering committee? Oftentimes within that chain, there's breakdowns. So what the steering committee thinks is, I have full visibility of what's happening with the project, but hey, I'm sorry, the key users haven't updated the project plan, or they haven't updated where they are in their tasks. So really, how accurate is that visibility at the end of the day? There has to be a full cadence on when people are actually updating the proper project documents to create that visibility and have that that perfect, whatever, 50,000 foot view of the project versus the 10 to 10 foot view of the project. So you understand everything in between.
Totally agree. And on the business side of things, if I'm managing a project, I need to make that project plan visible. I need all of those tasks to be visible to my whole team, because how are they going to know what to do and when to do it if they can't see it? And I think as a project manager, that turns your role into more, delegating out tasks, telling people what they need to do, chasing them by email, walking up to their desk, whatever. And then that's not really the role you want as a project manager. It's certainly not how I like to do things. If you have your project plan visible, and totally agree, things like Smartsheet, Monday.com, Trello, Jira, whatever, I think those tools are really, really good. It's a great way to contain everything. I don't particularly recommend, using Excel and email in this day and age, because it's great to have these kind of fully self-contained project areas. But if you make that plan visible and it's what you use for all of your meetings, everybody knows what they're supposed to be doing. Everybody knows what each other is supposed to be doing. And that eliminates a lot of what you would otherwise be doing as a project manager, which is chasing people, telling them what they need to be doing, reminding them of deadlines. If you put that board up with their name assigned to it with the due date of yesterday, in your project core team weekly meeting, you don't need to say anything, because they have to, sit there in front of everyone and explain why they've not done it. You don't need to say it. It's on the board, it's visible. And that's really, really valuable, depending on how you like to be a project manager. But I like to see myself as a facilitator of the team, making it possible for them to do this project really well, making it possible for them to collaborate, I think is a great aspect of the visibility as well. If you can all see it, all see the plan, you will know exactly what's coming. And if we've forgotten something, it's not on the boards. You can, that's the point at which you need to mention it. So visibility, ultimately on the business side, tells everybody what they need to be doing when, and it holds them accountable without you as a project manager really needing to do anything other than bring them all into the meeting and share that project plan on screen. They'll talk about it. You might take us down the list and say, okay, we're talking about this. Now this one, how's this going? What's going on with this one? I can see it was due yesterday. What's happened? Is there anything we can help with? But ultimately it stops you from chasing and kind of being the big negative presence for everyone, probably avoiding you in the corridors because you're going to come and chase them. It eliminates all of that and kind of puts it on the entire project team together.
Yeah, it's so funny because listening to you to talk about the both of you about the different tools there, it just shows how powerful having a single shared source of truth is. And I think it's almost like you could say it's good practice if you are going on to your first ERP. Once you start to see the benefit of the team coming together, we're all looking at the same sheet, we're all working towards the same tasks and the same end goal. It's exactly the same. ERP is powerful because it is that single source of truth. Everyone's working from the same foundations, using the same tools, seeing the same information, and all hopefully pulling in the same direction. So I think it's almost, you could say that this is good practice for those end users once they actually get into the ERP and they're all using the same single system, just like they did during the project. Point number 4, because we're rapidly running out of time, and we need to keep the momentum going. So point number 4 here, keeping momentum and finishing the project. I would say this, well, all 5 points we've got are critical, but I would say this one is definitely critical and would seriously harm how successful go live is, because I don't think an ERP project really fails at go live. It probably fails months before, but you just didn't notice, or you didn't want to accept it when that kind of mid-project slump comes. People are suffering decision fatigue. People are panicking. People are dragging their heels. Or things aren't being pulled out and dealt with. So when we talk about keeping project momentum, 1, what do we mean? 2, what things should we look out for? And 3, how do we deal with them?
Emily?
Yeah, I think there's 2 parts to it. The first part is around the flow of the project. And I think, to be honest, we've touched on a lot of it with that visibility piece. If you have it, and the cadence from the structure, if you're having the meetings, you're making the plan visible, it's probably going to flow quite well. But I think Nirav had some good points on that. And then the second part of it for me would be around the definition of what the end of the project is, and what is phase 1 and what is phase 2, and how are we kind of creating governance and a plan around all of that. But before talking about the end of the project, I guess maybe if we have a few more points on flow would be useful.
Yeah, I look at it this way. I look at project momentum as, let's say, any sporting event. Let's take a basketball game, for example, right? You have they give you 6 timeouts, right? You have 3 per half. Some are, full timeouts, 30 seconds, and then some are 20-second timeouts, right? I look at that also like ERP project and a project plan. Like, you're going to have to take these timeouts throughout the project. It's just going to end up happening, but they need to be controlled, right? Imagine a basketball game where someone was allowed to take unlimited timeouts, or how long a timeout was going to be, that game would never end, right? There's a reason why you can only take a 20-second timeout or a 30-second timeout, because you got to make your decisions, you got to make your adjustments, you got to get back in the game, and you got to get going, right? You have a finish line that you have to get to at the end of the day. And I think oftentimes people think these projects they should be open-ended. Like, we need to be 100% perfect, right? Before we go live, or we need this to happen. But I think, these projects evolve so much. Software evolves, your business evolves, right? So I take that same analogy and tell customers like, hey, we're going to have these situations where we're going to run into a speed bump, but let's take out, 3 days. Let's talk about it. Let's figure out a plan. Let's solve it. Let's move on. Let's try to hit our go live date, guys. Because very easy, you could just stop. So one person, let's say purchasing, has the loudest voice in the whole project. All of a sudden, they don't see that the ERP system doesn't automatically update the expected receipt date from a vendor acknowledgement, for example, and they're all up in airs about it. They make a big, fuss about it and say, we're not moving forward with the project until we get this fixed and resolved. The partner's trying to give best practices, saying, hey guys, you could do this. Maybe here's an import scenario. Take an Acumatica, for example. To take an import scenario, pop them into an Excel spreadsheet. Go ahead and update your expected receipt dates inside Acumatica, right? That's like a phase 1. But phase 2, we could look at automating it. No, we can't do that. We can't do that. But now guess what happens? That project's going to stall, right? There's going to be a lot of back and forth. Maybe that enhancement's going to be like 80 hours, right, to do from an API perspective. But the business doesn't want to pay 80 hours. We know that that's not a big enough, issue right now that we could go live without it. And now you're looking at an extended, 6 months, potentially 5 months, right? Or you lose all momentum. So I am a very firm believer that, have timeouts in a project, but have them controlled and move forward. You got to get back in the game, and you got to keep playing, and you have to go live. That's just the end result at the end of the day. It's not going to be perfect, but we're going to get there.
Yeah.
Right? We're eventually going to get there because you have software that's going to really supercharge your business, right? But you're going to solve maybe 5 out of 15 things for phase 1, and then you're going to start solving the other things later on.
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing you say is really the success, or at least the companies that finish ERP projects on time, they kind of have one thing in common, right? And it's just make decisions, make the decisions and move on. And not necessarily perfect decisions. They're not going to be, all of the traffic lights aren't going to be green. You're not going to make every single decision exactly what you need. There are going to be issues, but I hate to say it, but don't let perfect get in the way of good. Yeah, just make those decisions and move on and keep that momentum going. Just make timely decisions, right?
It goes back to structure. It goes back to project planning. Put these timeouts in places, right? That we're going to have to take them because things are going to come up, right? Have the right visibility so the right people understand where we're taking this time out. Let's make the decision and keep them moving. You saw how I connected all that, by the way? That was actually pretty nice.
Expert.
We're going through all of the different sports. Boxing and basketball. What else can we have? We should have golf since it's in your background.
We should have golf. Although golf could become like a 2-day event if it rains, or like there's hail and you have to stop playing because of natural factors.
What I was going to say. Oh, the other thing is also like those timeouts, use them. You're right. You've only got 3 per half, right? There's a set number. It doesn't mean you need to have timeout every single time. So I think it's important to identify what is just like normal project turbulence. Because people are going to be busy and you can't be super rigid. But at the same time, it's like when to call a time. When is it worthy of calling a timeout versus, guys, it's just a normal kind of project hiccup. Just keep moving, kind of. You need to be able to make a judgment call on those.
I totally agree. And it keeps the team morale high if you keep moving forwards as well. Yeah. So, what else do we mean when we talk about keeping our project momentum? And that's where I'd really like to talk about the end of the project, because I think two things can happen. One of them can be that the project sort of never ends and we keep adding and adding and adding. Or, we keep saying things will be in phase two, or maybe we bring them out of phase two and into phase one. You really need to be clear on what your goal is at the beginning, like going back to the structure. Um, and I think if we talk about, I'm kind of talking about a lot of my references here are thinking about, with a big ERP with like a big go live, which gives you quite a clear finish line, but that's not the case with all projects, especially depending on what they are. So some of them, if you're implementing something technical, if you're implementing something in the ERP, but then maybe something sort of gets handed off to some of the departments, maybe they need to do some work on their processes, or, everything's live, but we haven't written up the SOPs yet, the standard operating procedures. So we're going to leave that with them. If you don't keep leading the project, having the project plan, giving the visibility, giving the updates to your stakeholders, those things aren't going to happen. It's just going to fizzle out. And I would say the majority of projects that I see just fizzle out. And I think it can come down to the confidence of the project manager. If you've implemented your system, your upgrade, your new functionality, whatever, great, you've done your job, the bit that you're an expert in. And now this team, this department that you don't really know so much about, now they need to do, this little bit just to finalize it. And you think, well, that department head is, they rank above me. They know what they're doing. They don't need me to tell them what to do, but they do, because it's still part of the project. And you want it to finish. You want to be able to report out at the end, this is how it went. Yes, we've done everything, and end it, because then you also get to kind of celebrate the end of it as well and really close off your phase one, rather than have it just fizzle or drag out. And then maybe eventually you start some of your phase two things, or maybe more often than not, you don't. But so ultimately my recommendation here is really define what the end point of the project is. And even though the noise, all the excitement, all of the main stuff is done, just keep going, keep doing that project until everything is finished.
We may have people listening that don't understand when we're saying phase one and phase two. So what is the end point? What is the finish line? Because we've got down about keeping project momentum and finishing the project. But I would say that if we're saying, well, phase one and then phase two, one, what is phase two? And two, is the go live day actually the end of the project? Or are there things that you should continue to do afterwards? And then you can say, right, this was a successful project. Because I'd imagine if it's go live day and it's like, bye, done, I think a project can still fail. So where is the end? What is the finish line if it's not actually the go live day? Is there anything that we can do to keep momentum going after that period?
I think it comes back to structure at the beginning and how you defined your project. An important part of structure, which I don't think we really talked about, maybe we can another time, defining your goal, defining the problems that you're trying to solve, so that you're all very clear at the beginning, what are we actually trying to achieve? Because there's lots more you could do and people would like for it to do. And that's sort of where the concept of phase two comes in. I think it's usually, when we mention phase two, it's normally a way to say, yeah, that is a good idea, but it's just not something we're going to be able to get into this part of the project before we go live, maybe because it will take too long, or it will be too expensive. It takes us over budget of this project right now, or there are probably other reasons you do it, but it tends to be something people say to be like, yes, it would be great, it would be nice to have this, or it could be important to have this even, but can we live without it? Yes, let's call it phase two. And when we say phase two, we mean, okay, we go live, we get used to it, and then we're going to start some more projects. And this may be one of them. So that's what I would mean by that. And then the concept of stopping, do we stop on go live day, or even, at the end of go live week? Probably no. Maybe it depends a little bit on the project itself. But I would always plan in my initial structure, in my initial project plan, what do I think that go live week, go live month, hypercare period, what does that look like? How long do I expect our vendor to still be engaged? And really giving us that sort of very active support. Where might things still be going wrong? How are we going to handle the adoption of this project? That's what we mean by that. And to define it, I'd be defining it right at the very beginning before I even started. What is the end of this project? And it's going to vary depending on what the project is.
Nirav?
Yeah. So the way we kind of try to draw a line in the sand, saying, hey, did we get to this point and was it successful? 90% of the time, like I'm not gonna say 100, but 90% of the time, we're able to do the first month end close. So we say you get, the 30 days of support after you go live, and we're gonna make sure you reconcile your books and give you your own month-end procedures on what they look like. And month two, we generally feel that the customer should be self-sufficient to start running on their own, right? With just, more or less a part-time support basis at that point. But month end, the first month end close is usually our kind of, hey, we'll get to this point, and that's going to be the end of phase one, because we'll have delivered everything that you need to do to run your business by that standpoint. And then we recommend you take 2 or 3 months, keep running the system before we kind of initiate and go down the phase two.
All right, let's squeeze in. Well, I hate to say let's squeeze in 0.5, knowing what 0.5 is. I think we're all in agreement that we should definitely do a full episode on this one. But let's squeeze it in nonetheless. Change management. And we've already identified that there's 2 halves to this. There's the technical side, system configuration, data integrations, other platform integrations, and then the social side, people, behavior, the culture of the business. I think it's easy for me to say from being a technical guy, but I think most of my project focus is definitely on the first. And sometimes it's easy to just hope that the second kind of takes care of itself. You've got a brand new system. Everyone's going to love it, surely. That'll be fine. So let's break this down and understand in terms of project management, how we can handle change management. And I really want to focus a little bit more on that social side, on the people side first. So how do we best handle our people during such a huge kind of heart transplant of our business from a technical side?
I think it's a really difficult part of the project, probably quite underrated, and maybe one of the biggest problems that you have with these projects. You'd like to think everybody likes their new system. It's better than the old one, especially when the old system is, 25 years old. And on one hand, you think, okay, the old system is gone, so they have to adopt the new system. But then you go live and you find out, oh, they were actually doing most of the business in all of these Excel sheets and they still have those. So that maybe they're still doing them. So it really is make or break, to be honest. And I have seen ERP migrations kind of go live and then die because they're just carried on using Excel like they were used to. So it's a really challenging one, and it's something you have to plan for, and certainly not something I'm perfect at yet by any means. But one of the key ways I think to challenge it is, or to take on that challenge, is with that project organization, your roles and responsibilities, your key users and your workstream owners, your power users, and the visibility aspect. You're giving the people in the business ownership and responsibility over the success of this for their department or for a particular process, whatever. You can adopt things such as train the trainer, which is where instead of the project team or the vendor or the IT team training all of your users, you're taking their power user, someone relevant within a department, and saying, we're going to train you, and then you're going to go and train everyone else. And then that makes it more applicable to the day-to-day, less like, the IT team or the business or people from some other country, leadership who are based in the US, but we're based in Spain, they're telling us what to do. You're kind of eliminating that when you start to move the training over to the people that they work with and giving them that ownership. So that is a way to do it. It's not perfect, but it helps. And I think we could delve in more and more, but I think as a key big number one, make sure there are people in the business who have ownership over parts of the project.
Yeah, I think that's critical, because it's so easy to not see that, especially if you're not one of those end users doing day-to-day transactions, but you're the project manager, that you need to see whether I guess people are just, they're in this, you think they're in the system and the system go live and the business just quietly works around it with those Excel files and you're none the wiser. And I think it's so critical because it's that kind of stuff that really starts to determine whether the whole project was worth the money. If it falls flat because of organ rejection, right? If we hark back to one of our earlier episodes, the business just rejects it, then, from a cultural point, from a human point, from the technical point, that's the thing that really governs whether it's actually worth the money. And I think when you're looking at that kind of from the people side, there's going to be issues. People are going to resist it. And it's not because of laziness, because we know that, a modern ERP system will give them time back. You can better focus them on more value add stuff and grow the business. We know that. So it's not laziness. It's the kind of loss of control. It's the people behind that. It's the fear of exposure. Now you've taken away their Excel spreadsheets and their old system. What if the new system starts to show that they've been doing their job wrong? And I think that genuine disruption to the people is the thing that can really make or break the project, because you might have the best technical implementation ever, but if people just don't like it and are actively looking for workarounds or scrabbling away trying to get back to the way they used to operate, the executive stakeholders walk in and see that, and people are still busy doing all of this extra non-value add stuff. Wasn't a success, right? People can make or break this project. From a partner side, then, is there anything that you could help post go live to get that business going? I know obviously you said in our point before around finishing the project, let's get you to month end. Is there stuff that you're doing then during those first few weeks after go live that helps people in the business from this kind of cultural change management point of view, or is that purely on the business? Maybe you got some tips anyway on here.
Yeah, I think all good stuff right there, all valid and viable. Every partner is different. And I'll kind of tell you what our culture is and our philosophy is that, we don't implement the what, we try to implement the why. And what I mean by that is, we'll implement Acumatica or we'll implement, Business Central. But end users really, at the end of the day, don't care about that. They want to know, how is the system going to help them do their job, right? So what we try to tell them is, business objective wise, we try to pull you out of spreadsheets. We try to pull you out of different things that you're doing in silos, and that is change management. But we try to do it in a way that has less friction involved in that conversion process. And there's gaps and things like that we need to kind of identify. But the more I think we're able to give positive reinforcement that this change, difficulty of this change is maybe just temporary. Long term, it works out, and everyone's on a single system, and it actually helps build your job. And a piece that we didn't even talk about today is how AI is helping in this project management for ERP projects, right? And when you look at it and say, well, there's AI out there, what's happening with the data? You're creating clean data, and that data then is helping you by way of agents or by way of other kind of, however you've instituted, AI for your ERP project, that is just not you doing the same steps. You're doing those steps a lot more efficiently right now. So now you're more on the business, making better decisions than, spending half your day doing data entry, right? That you were doing before, or chasing down 4 or 5 people to get to the information you're looking for. So, we really focus on that. It's always, human nature is inevitable for people when you go live to say, hey, let me go grab my spreadsheet again because I'm just too scared of where we are with things. And we say, hey, hold on, before you go to there, right? Let's validate this data. Okay, it could be wrong, sure, absolutely. But let's now try to work together. Let's fix it. So next time you have the same inquiry, you're going to have good data at the end of the day. So you kind of have to start that right away as soon as you go live to gain that trust and that confidence with the users.
Is there anything on the technical side then in change management? Are there things that we should be looking at in terms of keeping our eye on? Maybe any integrations with other systems that we need to be talking to throughout ERP? What would you do for change management from a technical perspective? What are you looking for?
Yeah, I think if we're talking about integrations after go live, I don't think we've done the best job of planning for the integration prior, right? I think in my perspective, anytime there's integrations involved, that has to be scoped early on and developed tested, piloted before we go live. And if there's integration after that, we try to minimize, like I said, dilute the success of the project, right? Somebody may think that it's super important that we need this integration now, but that was never discussed. The steering committee didn't think it was necessary, right? So we have to have those hard conversations and say, hey, yeah, there's this integration. It's just going to be pushed off a little bit. You're going to continue doing what you're doing at the end of the day. So, those are sometimes hard conversations, or those are easy conversations, right? It all depends on how we've set the plan up. What's the structure around this, right? We try not to cry wolf unless we absolutely need to when it comes to change management.
Emily, any closing thoughts?
With the technical side of change management, I would think it's very relevant post go live, because pre go live, it is all being logged. It was all in your project plan. It's all there as a task somewhere. Then you go live and we realize, oh, what about this? How am I going to do this now? Oh, we can't do this anymore. How does this thing work? I can't print this thing anymore. What happened? And you end up adding a bunch of stuff in that you had to add in. It could be, pretty minor things, but that list of changes can get out of control quite fast, and little changes can go in that maybe, other people from the team don't know about now, because the department who spotted it, they went, straight to the vendor. You're not meeting up as your project team anymore, so it's not getting publicized like it used to be. So what I think is important post go live with your change management, change control, is making sure you have some kind of system in place for logging and approving those changes to the system. And you need that going forwards anyway when you're managing any kind of software. But I think the particular danger zone for that is right after go live, when you change a bunch of little things and now suddenly, your screenshots and your SOPs and things are not quite correct, and it all makes it a bit harder to follow as your users are trying to get used to a new system.
Yep. Wise words. And I think that is a wrap for today's episode. A huge thank you to you, Emily, for joining us on this one. I think your perspective on the real world side of this, what it actually
You're
looks
welcome.
like from the business. We might have you back on. We might have you back on.
Yeah.
It's good to see it from the business side of actually going through this. So I'm sure our listeners would have gained a lot from having you here. So maybe you can
Having
come
me
back.
again, perhaps.
Perhaps.
I say she comes back. So
Okay, you've twisted my arm.
I feel like Rex from Toy Story. What? We're being replaced? When he flips out. So yes, and thank you to everyone listening. So whether you are on YouTube or Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts, we hit all of the platforms. And if today's episode resonated with you, please do give us a like, give us a review, share it with a colleague who might be going through an ERP project or got one on the horizon, and definitely subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. As ever, we are the ABCs of ERP and beyond. We come out with a new podcast every 2 weeks on all major platforms, as I said. So make sure you find us. We also like to spam it on LinkedIn. So reach out to us, Nirav Shah, Peter Nicholson, and Emily, who's replacing both of us by the sounds of it. You can find us on LinkedIn. And I should say, we also find us on TikTok as well.
Yes.
We haven't done a TikTok dance or anything yet, so we'll have to work on something.
Yeah.
I look forward to it.
Yeah.
She says with gritted teeth.
Well, I don't have to do it, right? It's you two. So I look forward to seeing it.
Hey, Peter, get on those AI images quick. Because I don't know if we could do the real one.
Yeah. All right. I'll work on something. Very good. Thank you both. And I'll see you on the next episode.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.